My name is Marc Urselli. I'm an audio engineer and music producer. So here we are sitting at Eastside Sound in the Lower East Side of New York City. This is a place that's very dear to my heart, and it's a recording studio that was opened in 1972 by Lou Holtzman, who still to this day owns the studio. I operated, I'm the chief audio engineer and the studio manager, but Lou is the proud owner. The studio is about to turn 50 years old in 2022. We're very proud of that. Electric Lady is the only other studio downtown New York that's that old. Every other studio in New York is either not as old or not downtown. So Lou always tells the stories of how when he opened the studio in 1972, the musicians were afraid to come to the Lower East Side because down here was drug central. Now it's high rises and fancy people. It was on Allen Street up until about 9/11 on 3 floors. So it's a much larger operation. We had to downsize a bit to go with the flow of the industry. So now we're on a ground floor with 2 studios, a large Studio A and a smaller Studio B. Studio B is just a production suite with an ISO booth. Studio A is this control room. And then behind that glass, there's a live room with 6 ISO booths. The cool thing about this is that not only it's the oldest studio in New York, or one of the oldest 2 studios in New York, but it's also the studio with the most isolation booths in New York. And honestly, in a lot of other cities as well, because I've been to a lot of studios all over the world. I've yet to find a studio that has more than 6 ISO booths. If there is one, I'd love to know. We have a live room. We have 6 ISO booths all around. They all look into the live room, so you have perfect line of sight amongst about 4 of them and partial line of sight with all the others amongst the other 2. So you can do up to 7 musicians completely isolated. Every room has a headphone mixer, so every musician can have their own headphone mix. And obviously you can do musicians in the same room if they want to be all together for vibe and whatnot. They can all be in the live room. We've done that too. We have a grand piano, and we have Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzers, lots of amps, lots of guitars. We have 3 drum sets because Lou Holtzman was also a drummer in his young age. And the doors between the live room and the largest of the booths opened up so we can slide the piano in and out. What that does is it gives us the opportunity when we do a jazz record to have the piano out in the live room and let the piano resonate. And when we do a rock record and you want a bigger rock sound with more room mics on the drums, we put the drums out in the live room and we roll the piano into the biggest of the booths that can fit the piano. It's a very unique studio, beautifully designed. This control room was designed by Frank Commentali, who designed a bunch of room at the Hit Factory, Wycliffe Jean's room, I think Alicia Keys' room. He's a great designer. You can see it's perfectly symmetrical, beautiful fabric and woodwork. We've always prided ourselves in having analog consoles with digital control. So we always had either Harrisons or Neves. Even at the old studios, before we moved here, we had a Harrison in one studio and we had a Neve in the other studio. So we've kind of retained that history of having the duality between analog and digital combined in one space or in one console. What happens in a studio changes a lot based on what kind of music you're recording and what kind of ensemble you're recording. And there's a lot of different ways of doing the same thing, and none of them are really wrong or right. There is no right or wrong. So whatever you choose works best, which is the experience that you bring to the table. What we really should aspire to happen, and what I would like to see happen, and what I luckily in my life see happen most of the time, is you take a bunch of people that are talented, you put them in the same room, or like Eastside Sound in a recording studio with multiple ISO spaces, whatever, and they make music. And if you have amazing people on the other side of that glass and you have good gear to capture it, you're gonna walk away with a really amazing record. That's what I aspire to do, much more so than making records piecemealed. I don't really care so much for this new way of working where you do one little element at a time and you do 100 overdubs and 100 vocal takes and then you comp it together. I'm much more old school. I prefer doing 2 or 3 takes, doing whatever overdubs you need to do, and really focusing on the real essence of the music. Not try to fix it in the mix, not try to fix it in the box. Get it right on the get-go, from the get-go. That's how the great records were made, so if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Yeah, I like the idea of looking at the engineer as a documentarian. When we're recording, that is really what we're doing. We're documenting what is happening on the other side of the glass. Audio engineering is a mixture of science and art. So there's definitely some science and there's definitely some art and there's definitely some taste. If an engineer chooses a certain kind of mic versus another, or a certain kind of preamp versus another, or moves or directs the microphone, positions the microphone in a certain way versus another, those are artistic choices that are part and a result of the experience that the engineer brings to the table. So yes, we are documentarians. We're also painters because we're painting a certain picture with colors that we choose. And the same picture can be drawn or painted in with a lot of different colors. You can have a beautiful black and white picture or a beautiful color picture, and the subject is still beautiful, but you choose what colors to use and what techniques to use and what brushes to paint it with and so on and so forth. So I'd say we're a mixture of documentarians and painters. When I do a John Zorn record with a quartet or a quintet of incredible jazz musicians, I let them do their things, I get out of the way, I put all my mics so that I can capture what they're doing, and they do fantastic takes. They come in, they listen, they choose the takes they like, and it's done. That's why when I do a John Zorn record, it's usually done within 2 days. Most of the records, and I've done over 117 or 18 by this point with Zorn, are done in 2, maximum 3 days. I'd say 70 or 80% of the records are done in 2 days. We record in one day, we mix the next day. Because John knows exactly what he wants, he has amazing musicians, he teaches them the music, we record a couple of takes, and that's it. And my mixing starts from the recording, because the way I position microphones and choose preamps and set levels is already determining, to a degree, my mixing choices. But there's very different records. There's records where you record first the drums with the bass and then you start overdubbing. Like if I do a rock record, a lot of bands will do drums and bass and have a guide guitar or a guide vocal. And then when they're happy with the basic tracks, then they start overdubbing the guitars and they start overdubbing the voices, the vocals. And then anytime you're in that realm of rock and metal, you start talking about mixes that take a lot longer than 1 day. You start talking about comping vocals if necessary. Like I said, I'm not a fan of doing a million takes, but you're still probably going to do 2 or 3 takes and choose the best one, or make a composite take of the best parts of the 3 takes, or however many you do. So you have to do all of that, sort of a post-processing, post-recording phase that's between recording and mixing. And then mixing also has a lot of ways to approach the subject of mixing. Some people, and a lot of it is determined on what they can afford. Some people choose to be present and attend the mix session, be here and offer their opinions and comments and whatnot. Other people don't want to be there and come later to check it. Zorn does that often. He lets me do my thing and he comes later in the day and he checks my mixes and we sign off and we move on. Some people that don't have the budget to mix in a studio like this ask me to do an unattended mix, which I do on my own spare time, either here or at home. And then I send them mixes via email and they send me comments and I send them back new mixes. So it's much more affordable for them than having to rent a studio. And they walk away just as happy because they get exactly what they want with multiple revisions. So there's multiple ways to skin a cat, they say. Thanks for spending time with me. Thanks for coming. Thanks for checking out Eastside Sound. Time for me to get back to work. See ya.